said no.
That's all new because of the pump out?
No. Red Brook was always there.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Board meeting of February 1st, 2022. I'll start off by introducing the members of the Planning Board, starting over at my left, as Doug Braskin, who is an alternate. Next to Doug, Von Dugan, Peter Goodwin, and Mike Hodder, who is the vice chairman. To my right, John Thurston, Brad's Harriman, who is the from the Board of Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs, who is an alternate. We do need an alternate for tonight, so I think you were it last time.
Yes, Doug's turn.
And so, Doug, would you be willing to sit on this one?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one public hearing. The applicant will go through the requirements. Planning board members have an opportunity to ask questions at that point. There's a waiver being granted. Once the waiver and the application is then considered complete, we'll open the public hearing for any members of the public that want to speak to the issue. After the public has had their opportunities, we'll ask Tavis if he has any conditions for us to consider, and then I'll close the public hearing, and planning board members will generally vote on the issue. So, the first item is Daniel DeVers, care of Bucky and Joey Holdings, LLC. This is at 399 Pleasant Valley Road, tax map 235-15, case 2022-03. This is for a subdivision for two lots. One of the lots is already developed, has a duplex on it. The reason that he is here is to have this subdivided, but it has been to ZBA already for a waiver for the frontage of the new lot. Also, Randy, you're going to need to speak to us about the waiver. You need to tell us that the lot is in harmony with adjacent lots in the neighborhood, is consistent with sound planning practices, and ensures the environmental integrity of the site. And I'm sure that you will be willing to speak to us about that, as well as other issues. Thank you.
Yes. Again, Randy Tage Road, Norway Plains, for the applicant. As the chairman has described, this is a two-lot subdivision. How's that coming out? Okay. The two-lot subdivision, starting with a 8-acre, plus or minus 8-acre parcel, being divided into a little over 3 acres and a 4.5 to 4.6 acre parcel. Obviously, the configuration of the existing lot is a little odd shaped at one end with kind of a panhandle or a pigtail. Again, the questions that come up is why did it turn out that way? And that's basically because that's the way the deeds were conveyed, certain distance off Pleasant Valley Road. And, you know, one guy owned the whole thing and they got chunked out over time, and that's the shape they ended up with. In this particular case, the majority of the rear of the 8-acre parcel is jurisdictional wetlands anyway. So it was our task to prove that we had, you know, viable upland. And it's a 3-acre zone. And if you looked at the plans, you know that we've got about 3 acres, a little over 3 acres of upland on each proposed lot. Also, as described by the chairman, the parcel received the variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The frontage requirement in the zone, 200 feet. The applicant was around 18 feet shy of that after it was surveyed, and so they went to the ZBA. Originally, we were going to split the frontage, 191, 192 feet. And that is why, I'll get into it later, why we show a little access driveway easement, because the applicant was kind of going on that theory when he redid his driveway. But the zoning board felt that having one lot that met the frontage and one lot that didn't was a better scenario. So they wanted to see 200 feet on one and the remaining frontage on the other. So that's how that went down. Both of these lots, before I forget, are under 5 acres, so they require state subdivision approval, which we haven't applied for yet because we wanted to get local approval first, especially with the variance and the waiver request. But generally, again, the 3 acres, they're well and septic lots. One of the lots has an existing dwelling on it, recently approved septic design. We did a test bit on the other lot, and we show a viable 4,000 square foot area for septic and proposed well location. Again, that'll go to the state for approval should they get positive result tonight. As far as the site features go, we did topography, we had jurisdictional wetlands mapped by a wetland scientist, and again, the delineation of that shows on the topography plan, has more of the site features on that. I'll be spinning it back to the front side to discuss the shape waiver, which I have a little bit of history with because I remember when it was brought to fruition and came to that public hearing. So in this particular case, and I'll speak to the items that the chairman referenced. In general, in this case, I color-coded the other side so that I could make it as clear as possible as to what those numbers are. So maybe we should just go to that right off unless you have any other questions on just the general part. Oh, I should mention, our original narrative, I think my office staff get a little confused with the numbers, whether we're supposed to be over and under. Terry wasn't around then, so we submitted, the narrative that was submitted was incorrect as far as being over or under the numbers. I've revised that, and I told Terry I'd just bring a copy to the meeting instead of resubmitting something, if that's fine with you guys.
Common mistake.
They thought we should be over the number instead of under, and I was like, no, that's not how it works. Let me switch this over, and I'll try to outline that scenario. So if you look at the original lot is in blue, outlined in blue, that's around 8 acres. In the original lot, the form factor to begin with is 38.65. And obviously the number you want to be under is 35. So the original lot starts out 38. If you take that original lot and you nip off this portion right here, which we're showing yellow, that drops it all the way down to a 19.9. So generally, just for understanding mathematically, this is what's throwing it off. So then if you go to the subdivision and you go to orange, which is this lot here, the 4.5 acre lot, 4.8. That one comes out to 47.46. Okay, so that's about 12 over the 35. If you do the same thing with that lot, you're down to 22.9, 23. That's how much it affects that number mathematically. And again, the green lot, obviously, the green lot is, 18. So, but when you have the whole thing, it reduces, because you go by area, it reduces the number a little bit. Once you nip this off, that's why the orange raises the number up. Does everybody kind of understand that? So it's a function of the length of the sides and the area. And again, I can speak to the waiver in the requirements. I mean, I think generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are all there, most of you, the idea for a shape regulation was, there was probably multiple criteria, but the main one was so that someone wasn't jerry-rigging a property line to either get an additional lot or to circumvent buffers or, you know, certain other site feature requirements. So in this case, I don't believe we're doing that. And I think you can look at that and see that. As far as, you know, as far as it being, you know, reasonable in the neighborhood, I think if you look at the lots on your tax map that I passed around, you'll see they're all pretty much that sort of rectangle from Pleasant Valley Road or bigger. So I think in this particular case, other than the little pigtail that's going to be attached to this lot, and again, it's all jurisdictional wetland anyway, you know, people would say, well, why don't the neighbor get it? Or why don't you try to sell it to the neighbor? But it's like, for what purpose? And nobody, you know.
Actually, it's safer, I think, environmentally to
Just
leave it as part of this lot.
And so, and again, it was similar shape on the tax map. This back line was a little bit different when we actually surveyed it. Actually made the area a little bit smaller and a little bit different. But it still is generally the same shape it started. What was with the other?
Could you also speak to the driveway access?
Sure. The driveway access is existing, and when we were going to do this at first, we were going to split the frontage. So I think Mr. Devereaux thought he had more room over there. Well, now the driveway encroaches a little bit on where we want this lot. So I included a little 15-foot access easement, even though it's the same owner. Should they ever get sold separately, this 15-foot access easement, you know, eliminates him having to change the driveway location. We do propose a new driveway location over in this area for the undeveloped lot, and it's located so it isn't right across from a house or something like that. I know there was a question at the ZBA, I think, about that. So again, that's the proposed location that we can, on the plan. When the septic design is done, when they go for a building permit on that lot, that'll be vetted out by, you know, by Public Works. Getting back to the conditions. Harmony with adjacent lots, sound practices, ensures environmental integrity. I don't think, unless you guys have any question, there's a problem with that.
All right, great.
John?
Questions?
Just on the driveway.
Sure.
So on your piece of paper here, it shows it over to the easterly side of the existing home.
Over here?
On the green lot, yeah. So
Yep.
is the 15-foot easement for the green lot, but it's on the orange lot?
Yes. Because see where the turnaround is on the driveway? So the easement is in benefit of the green lot, John. I didn't green it out. You with me?
Well, this one here shows a hammerhead with a driveway in the middle of it, no? Isn't that right there? Isn't that the driveway for the green lot that comes in? There's a hammerhead, no?
Yeah, that's a driveway it's a duplex, so there's a driveway on either
okay,
side.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. The existing one is a duplex, so there's a driveway on either side for the entrance on either side of the building. Yeah, so this is just because of this turnaround in case it's sold separately. I threw it on there because I thought it was a good idea. And the other thing was, Again, anybody have any questions about how that pigtail?
Okay.
I know we talked about this before.
Okay, well, we have been, anybody else have any questions? Okay, good.
My observation would be that the existing building was existing, and so therefore, in some ways, the direction of the driveways that you have next to it were almost required. So therefore, the fact that you're putting in an easement there makes sense.
Yeah,
because
again,
it was-
it really kind of settles around, this has been an ongoing process between us taking our time to do it and the variance procedure. The sketch that we submitted for the variance showed a split of the frontage. So in the meantime, they redid that driveway, thinking that they were gonna have some extra room on that lot because we were splitting the frontage. But then we had to go with 200 feet, and so that changed it around a little bit, so.
And I have another question. There's a Quonset hut which seems to be bisected by the property line. What happens to that?
Yeah, well, that's there now, Peter, and that's going to stay there unless the two abutters decide something differently. Because with putting the subdivision line is really isn't going to change that. I think that line was never, it was surveyed back, I want to say in the late 1900s or something, not late 1990s or whatever, when that lot was created. It just never was monumented along the line, so I don't think anybody really knew exactly where it was till we did it this time. So, again, the owner's here, Dan Devereaux is here, and maybe he could speak to that, or if he's had a conversation with it.
So,
How you doing? I haven't spoke to the neighbor about it specifically, but I have no intention of asking him to move it if it doesn't impede upon the driveway that's going in there. I have no problem with them leaving it there, even if it comes over a little bit, unless it's a problem for getting the driveway in. Any other questions? Let me.
so who owns it?
The neighbor to the right.
So we have precedent in one other case on Pleasant Street where we had a boundary lot being created, and we asked the owner to move their overhang structure. How does that play into this in the long run? What are we going to do? Are we going to set precedent here? Is this acceptable, or it is? Okay. It's acceptable.
I mean, if you want me to address it, if the proposed line were going to bisect the structure would have to be relocated prior to the new line going in. But since it's the existing line, nothing's changing.
That's
And I
good.
think the question of who owns it, if it were to go to court, because this came up recently in Wolfeboro, is that they each own their own half.
Really,
Nothing really there.
it's not really used for anything.
Another question on your notes, note number 9. This is just for my own curiosity. Road right-of-way, 2 rods width. Is that Pleasant Valley Road?
It's Pleasant Valley Road in that area.
Is 2 rods?
Yeah, I mean, we had layouts, there's different layouts on Pleasant Valley Road, and in this particular case, the surveys and the monuments that were done previous, and the walls that are out there, stone walls that are out there, give a width that would be 2 rods.
Okay.
And the layout in that area says 2 rods. It's hard sometimes to tell where you are depending on the old names
Yeah.
with those layouts.
Yeah.
But we, as surveyors, have to put a note on there to basically say, why did you put it like this? You know, and in this case, we had no evidence to make it wider.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question. The original lot before subdivision is considerably out of form factor.
Yes.
After subdivision of the 2 lots, one is in conformity with the form factor rule and the other one is not.
That's correct.
Would that mean, therefore, that the subdivision is bringing the property more closely into conformity with the regulation than if it were not subdivided?
It would if you average the 2 form factors. Like I said in my narrative, now that's maybe semantics, Mike, as far as the math, but if you average the 2 form factors, it comes out under 35, 33, I think, and it starts out at 38.
Yeah,
So
I'm
in
thinking,
that vein, yeah, it would make it less than.
I'm thinking in terms of your application for a waiver.
Yeah, and
Okay.
again, something for the future thought, but I asked for the waiver to form factor, but it's really the waiver to form factor for one of the lots because the other one
Right.
meets it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's my point, Randy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then what we need to do is first consider the waiver and then consider, after that, then consider the application complete. So it seems that Randy has gone through all of the qualifications that the regulations call for as far as the waiver is concerned. As I said before, I do think that it's going to help from the environmental standpoint because it's not on these other two properties where they could infringe possibly. So from my mind, it seems like a reason for granting the waiver.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make a motion to grant the waiver from 175.53.2 form factor for this subdivision application.
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now that the application is considered complete, somebody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
And motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Now I can open the public hearing. If any member of the public wants to speak to this issue, now is your time to do that. Okay, Tavis, are there any other issues that we should think about, or are we ready for the conditions of approval?
I don't have anything other than the recommended conditions of approval. The first refers to the plan set that was submitted on January 11th, 2022. The second stipulates the need for a Mylar for recording at Carroll County Registry of Deeds. Number 3, the applicant responsible for payment of all recording fees. 4 is the standard, everything that's part of the file, and the most restrictive will be controlling. So included therein would be the handout received this evening. And then 5, the applicant shall be responsible for monumentation and the submittal of a certificate of monumentation once that is completed.
Okay, should we include the fact that the waiver was granted?
That's not necessarily. That's how you achieved a complete application.
Oh, okay, and, okay, so the waiver is okay, and that would also, the frontage would be okay from ZBA because that's part of the record, too?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I'll close the, go ahead, Vaughn.
I wonder if we should have a condition that before subdivision is final, that they have a septic design approved by the state in hand.
It's typically not done to have the septic design in hand before subdividing. You just have to prove that you can achieve, which is what the test pits did.
Oh, you've proven that?
Yes.
Okay.
Vaughn, it's going to have to get state subdivision approval for the lot itself.
Okay.
So that can obviously be a condition for DES subdivision approval, and that takes care of the lot being able to have a septic. When someone goes to build, the specific septic design be done under the building permit.
I would like to see that condition written, just because we shouldn't have a town approval of a subdivision that the state won't approve.
Well, the state has to approve it. Yeah, it
Then
goes,
what's the status if the state doesn't?
right. It's
Yeah.
usually the town conditions it upon the state.
That would be recommended condition number 6, applicant shall comply with state law.
Okay,
Well, before the subdivision is granted,
Or it's recorded.
recorded.
So applicant shall receive state sub-approval prior to recordation.
okay, anything else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing then. Discussion? And if there's no discussion,
I'm not sure
entertain a
we need
motion?
this. I'm sorry, go ahead. So moved.
Okay,
To
thank you.
approve.
Okay.
Seconded.
Motion has been made to approve this
And seconded.
subdivision and seconded. Okay. All right, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed and abstentions. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Randy. Okay. Let's see, Okay, the application for special exception
Madam
with ZB.
Chairman,
Oh,
it seems like there are people in the audience who are related to the stormwater update. Should we move that?
this is a
before
very
this?
quick item,
Yeah.
I think. The special
Well, for me, it's a very,
ZBA comments.
This shouldn't take but 5 minutes at the most.
Okay.
My only concerns with these are numbers 4 and 5, and I think that we can rely on the Board of Selectmen to cover both numbers 4 and 5 for this board. That would be the only concern I would suggest that we bring to the BOS's attention. Deeded access a right, and construction of the access way to public safety standards, or at least to public safety satisfaction.
Okay, well, actually, okay. What's the address on this one?
there is no address. Tax map is 260-090. It's down on South Main Street, just after you make the hard right turn. There's an image on the back.
Okay.
It's my understanding from the applicant, and subsequent to sending out the packet, I've received the book and page reference to the legal right-of-way that is alleged to provide right-of-way to this Lot 90. It refers to the heirs and assigns of people that go back to some handwritten deeds. So I've gone back to the applicant and say, you need to do the title work to follow this path all the way forward in order for the ZBA to move forward under this special exception. But I think that specifically speaks to number 4, as Mike Hodder referenced.
Yeah, I meant DBA as opposed to BOS, pardon, strike that.
Well, the other interesting point I want to add on that is there's discussion under number 6 that the applicant shall endorse the town's, quote, acknowledgement regarding issuance of a building permit on a private way. And I can find no one in the building that knows where said form is. And the same also comes up under number 7. But I think the zoning board, should they choose to move forward with this, we can achieve the intent of those two statements under 6 and 7 with a simple deed restriction.
Okay.
We have had forms to that effect
Yeah,
in the
right.
past. I
Yeah.
would assume they're in the planning department's
You
files.
would think, but I've searched hard drive after hard drive and can't find it. But I will keep looking before next Monday.
Okay.
Okay, yes, we
So
have
the
had
reason I wanted to
several,
bring this up
right.
specifically to the board, 175-55-1C1 specifically says that the ZBA can't consider a special exception without review and comment by the board. So this counts as your review, and I will forward any comments you have. And I wanted to point out that this is an interesting variation on proceeding through 674-41 that says you can't issue a building permit on a lot without frontage.
That's why I was saying BOS,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what lot access way is granted over?
I believe it's coming over 92 in that picture,
Okay.
but it might be coming over 89.
But he will have to establish that
They will need to establish
to
that.
the ZBA's
yes.
satisfaction.
Correct.
Okay.
It's only 15 feet wide, whatever it is.
It's a plowed driveway. I just drove by it yesterday. It's that plowed driveway that goes up in there.
It's a plowed driveway.
Yeah, I believe the applicant plans to be there for the site walk on Monday evening, or Monday afternoon.
15 feet is going to be kind of tight for an engine.
It's a driveway.
Well, the driveway goes to 91.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
And I mean, not that the board needs to get into fire code, but any structure on there is going to be well within 300 feet of South Main Street. Basically, you wouldn't necessarily have to take fire apparatus up to the future house site.
Okay, any other comments to send on to the ZBA?
Well, I guess it would go to Vaughn's question, whether or not it was septic approved.
Well, they have to prove that before they can get a building permit. But the criteria don't establish that.
And we're not creating a new lot, it's already existing, it just has no access. So that's a little different.
Okay.
Anything else?
So I'll pass on the comments about C4 and 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Do we need to vote on this, or is this just?
It's just comments.
Okay, all right. Okay, very good. Okay, on to the next. Next item is the stormwater management regulations. We discussed this at the last meeting and asked you all to take a look at it, at the regulations, so that we could have a discussion and hopefully then be able to set this for a hearing for the site plan amendment and subdivision amendment. Actually, the issue that we're looking at is an amendment to the site plan and subdivision in order to include the updated stormwater management regulations. This would require an applicant who requires site plan approval for multifamily and commercial development, as well as new subdivisions, to show the planning board how the stormwater will be managed on site. These regulations were first adopted in 2014. So there are regulations, and so this actually will be an amendment of the ones in the site plan. The subdivision will be new. The Stormwater Committee has met 8 times, first 3 times with Brad, John, and myself, and then another additional 5 times with the subcommittee. This is coming to you for your comments and questions. In addition, John and I have met and agreed that the first thing we need to do is to get these regulations adopted. And then at the next meeting, we need to move on to the issues that John had brought up previously at the last meeting, saying that we need some sort of community or some education on how these regulations will be enforced and how effective they will be. So, anyway, I do have one change, and Tavis, I can give you this, but it's actually a change that was in the previous stormwater management ones, and I'm not sure how we neglected this, but we did, because actually what it does is give the planning board right to require any development that disturbs less than 10,000 square feet to submit and then implement and approve stormwater management when there is a potential for degradation of the local water resources. So the regulations speak to 10,000 and above. This would give the planning board the ability to really say to people, you know, how are you going to deal with stormwater management, and then take it from there. So John has got some questions or comments and
Madam
additions.
Chair,
Right?
Would it be easier to have everyone with comments get me a copy, and then I can distribute a copy that includes all of the
Okay, it really won't
suggestions?
take him that long. I don't.
Oh, it's fine. I'm just,
Yeah,
instead of me trying to write down everything that everybody comes up with, it might be easier.
yeah, well,
When we're done, yeah.
he can then give it to you, right.
So as excuse me, as this document goes, there's a requirement that we're asking people to do when they develop their lots, and the requirement is stricter now. We're going to ask you to reuse your water. But at the time when we're making the document stricter, we also have to give some allowances to the engineers to design the products so they have the time to allow the water to infiltrate into the ground, rather than having a stricter document with harder restrictions and less time to do the job. So the extension that I'm talking about tonight is to have the 72-hour on line C on page 3 increased from 48 hours, so that we can allow our engineers to develop these areas. So they're still holding the water, and it just gives the engineers that little bit more time to allow, because we know some of the soils around here aren't as good as we'd like them to be. And
Okay, so that's E at the top of page 3,
yes.
and just for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So when we talk about the longevity and the projection of this document, one of the things that we talked about was the cumulative amount, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to get into that at our next phase. But when we talk about the cumulative amount, we get down into H, where that would probably be a good spot for that to be put in there on all newly generated stormwater for new development. So we'd like to try to incorporate that into these larger lots that have multiple projects, that if a smaller lot is in front of that lot, then it has to abide by all the restrictions, and a larger lot can have a little bit more leniency in their program. But we'd like to bring them into parallel with these other lots that have to conform. And obviously it's a lot coverage situation. When you have a lot of green space, you'll never meet that lot coverage. So that's the parity we're trying to get to. It's not in this document, but it's moving forward. Other things that we look to insert, which was Tavis's document on the stormwater management for his document. And when I talk about that document, I would see that going in just in front of Article K. Article 6 would be inserted into there. So that's what I think we're working towards on Tavis's end, and that's not in this document either. That's for further discussion.
Okay, well, what we wanted to do was put the most recent NHDS stormwater management.
Yeah,
rather than
that's
speak of volume 3.
Yes, and then that's down on N, where it says New Hampshire DES Stormwater Manual Volume. We want to put in most recent.
We will be getting an updated version.
Yes.
Yes. But that's
Otherwise, it's impossible to follow.
no doubt. And so there's one other area where that talks about the 2008 volume. We'd like to just use the most recent in that one also, and that was on page 9 on I in the middle, where it says December 2008 That would be most recent stormwater manual. So the other part that's really important about this is the stormwater management plan shall provide that recharge calculations aren't really getting calculated right now because we have a designer design based on a storm event, and so what we're actually going to be doing is we're asking them to hold the water longer, and then the recharge amount is into the ground, and then there's less discharge coming out the pipe in the long run. So that's really what our goal is, to get a stronger grip on that recharge amount. So when you look into this document and you say, well, how are you going to find that out? Well, there's GIS on page 6, where it says the SMP shall include calculations of the change in impervious areas, and it goes down in GIS files containing the coordinates of all the stormwater infrastructure elements. I think Tavis might be able to speak to how that is applied, and so long-term, that's a projection of all your areas in town that you integrate, and how you see that waterway becoming an improved stormwater management vein going into the waterways. You want to speak to that, Tavis? Because I think I'm about wrapped up here.
Well, by having people submit GIS coordinates on their stormwater improvements, it becomes very easy to track what's going on. One of the things that was done in the Seacoast in coordination with UNH is UNH has literally a computer database that they call PTAP, where all the communities submit their projects, and it tracks how much impervious is in the community. This project increases or decreases impervious area, how much is being stored, and basically how many nutrients are you keeping out of waterways. So as a start, simply having people turn in their GIS data, the town would then be posed to take the next step forward.
Given that there's a survey being done of this system, is it any expense to add the GIS coordinates to all this? I think it's probably just
I would say it's nominal
nominal.
for the level of detail that people are surveying things in now. Yeah. I would ask Randy, but he's not here. Typically,
I can't imagine that it's a problem, so and the GIS ends up doing a pretty good job of finding where the town boundaries are, and so, it's just like you add another little line to something and you put it in.
and it's not as though it has to be survey grade either. If you can't find a detention pond within 30 feet, you're not looking well.
You all said, John. Okay, anyone else? Doug, did you have some?
I have,
I've given my comments to Tavis via email.
Okay, but
I am someone who always likes simplicity, and on page 3, there's a runoff from impervious surfaces to be treated to cheat, et cetera.
right, there are quite a few errors like
But
that
then
need
you
to be
end up going to
fixed.
page 9, and there's the exact same verbiage. And it is fine, but is it possible to somehow abbreviate that? Probably not. Probably doesn't matter.
It could be.
Anyway, that's one suggestion I have. And the other thing is on page 5 with every effort should be made to use impervious parking surfaces. And then quite a bit later, there's something which talks about having it inspected over the long term. And I would think that that idea of the inspection should be associated with that particular item, so that it's not, you're not having to read that and then a page later find that you actually have to have some plan to maintain it.
Okay.
Okay, the discussion between you and Doug, is there anything that you need to share with this, or you're not going to make any changes? Or because we need to talk about it.
Comment on your comments?
Well, so I'm new to this, so I'm looking
Yeah,
at it
no,
from a
that's
different
okay.
perspective. So I'll give you the first comment I had, for example. On page 2, in the middle of the page, it talks about low-impact development.
Which page?
Page 2, point C, where it speaks about low-impact development, and it says that LID techniques that preserve existing vegetation. And I question whether that should say existing native vegetation, as opposed to all vegetation.
I thought we had put native vegetation in there.
Yeah, I think we did at some point in time.
If you have a non-invasive planting, but it is not native, then you'd have to worry about that. It might be that you want to label them invasive species.
Perhaps that's a
As
better
in, we
phrasing,
should get
yes.
rid of X, Y, Z, but, if somebody planted a hydrangea, which is not native, that's not a problem.
Yes, you're correct. I come at it from the perspective of when we bought our house here, it had a huge infestation of Japanese knotweed.
Oh.
So it took us several years to get rid of. That's why I was sensitive to it.
So I think that there need to be some statement in there which is suggesting that invasive species rather
Yes.
than normal plantings.
Yes, that's a good point. And then my other question, again, was on the next page, page 3 in the middle, paragraph H. It says that a development plan shall include provisions to retain natural pre-development watershed areas on the site by using natural flow patterns. And I wondered if that should be natural pre-development flow patterns, as opposed to patterns that might be generated as a result of the development.
Okay, and where did you want that one to go?
That's page 3, paragraph H. The last 3 words where it says.
Oh, the last, yeah, okay, using the redevelopment.
I guess I would have a problem with making that change, and the reason being is that if you had a stream coming down and you put a driveway in which slightly moved where that stream went by 10 feet, that would not be according to what pre-development flow. Although the general intent, the general flow, it hasn't been changed. So I think the wording on that would have to also be carefully.
Yeah. And then the thing I had greatest concern about was top of page 5, paragraph O. It says that trapped sediment and other disturbed soil resulting from removal of temporary measures shall be permanently stabilized prior to removal of temporary measures. So it seems like an impossible task there. And I had proposed different phrasing. Unfortunately, I don't have that with me. It was in the document that I sent to Tavis.
Yeah, right, okay.
Typically, what that's speaking to is if you have an area of silt fence that's accumulated a lot of material, you want that planted or treated in some way before you remove its impediment.
So certainly you could say, for example, trapped sediment and other disturbed soil resulting from removal of, should be stabilized before removal of temporary measures.
Yes.
Or removed. I mean, if it's just silt, you just remove the silt.
Yes, that's right. So you should essentially deal with the soil before you remove the temporary measures.
Yeah, I think that the current writing is to not be as prescriptive on how it's done, but to make sure that you're not letting the trapped material go.
And then really in a finished off situation, the silt fence and whatever would act as a line of defense while you were growing stuff in, and usually if it's planted or something, it's usually going to grow right up over that area. It's like Vaughn says, it's just a silt, so there shouldn't be a lot of material there, but I can see where your point is.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the intent, it's just peculiar phrasing.
Yeah, okay.
And then to go further in page 7, paragraph B3, it says on-site groundwater recharge rates shall be maintained by promoting infiltration through the use of structural and non-structural methods. I wondered if both are required, or could it be one or the other?
What's that?
Paragraph B3 on page 7, the first sentence.
Is it-
Want to
yeah.
remove or?
Is it an and, or should it read as an and or?
Yeah, it says and I wonder if should it be and or?
I think and or.
Should be and or, shall shall
either.
be, well, no.
Both could be used,
Talking about
or what word?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, right, 3.
the post-development site shall not exceed the annual recharge from pre-development. Shall not exceed the pre-development. So whatever you're building, post-development doesn't exceed what pre-development.
No, it's up with structural. Right now it says structural and non-structural. So the idea would be, or the suggestion is to change it to structural and or non-structural means.
Okay. All right, so,
Well, you can use both in the same plan, though, is that?
Therefore, the and or, yeah.
Okay.
so this would be an either or
And or.
and or, yeah.
The way it's currently written, you're required to use both.
Oh,
In all aspects, they probably will be using both, because they're not going to be able to use non-structural and hold back all the water. They're going to have something structural to do it and help them.
Then on page 10, paragraph 4H, I guess it is, it reads, an approved off-site location must be identified, and I wonder on whose approval that would be. I assume it would be the board approval, but it doesn't say that.
Yes, the intent is planning board approval, but it's probably written that way to say you also need the other property owner's permission.
Okay. I'm just, again, coming from an uninformed viewpoint, I wondered whose approval was
yeah,
required.
right, okay, all right.
And there were a number of grammar things, that I'm sure Tavis will take care of that. I don't think we need to go through that in detail here.
So you all set then? Okay.
I think we have one that I missed, actually. It's at the end, page 12. If you look at I, it talks about if no report is filed by September 1, municipal staff and the designated agent will have a site access to complete routine inspections to ensure compliance with the approved stormwater management and sediment and erosion control plans. Such inspections shall be performed at a time. And what it was thought about was this would be a good spot for a J, where you would, Tavis or his secretary or his planning office will provide a yearly report on all the projects that occur during the year with the maintenance plans, and if people are complying with the maintenance plans, so that we have an idea of how the process is going, and we can review whether or not there's full compliance, or we're seeing a few that don't want to comply with the finished product, and the inspection process that's going to go along with this, because it's this is probably the most important part of the whole program.
Right.
I don't know if it needs to be added as a J, because it's the planning board, I mean, it's a regulation of yourself. So what I'd suggest is that, following the September reporting timeframe, that there would be a scheduled workshop item to say, these are the plans that are out there, all are in compliance except for this
Right.
project, here's the process going forward to remedy it, et cetera.
Well, that was the idea of what what we were
Right.
talking about.
But I don't know if you need to put it in the regulations because it's for us to do, not for
Yeah.
the applicant.
It's internal rather than aimed at the applicant or the town.
Typically with the stormwater management report, I know you haven't seen them yet because they haven't happened, but typically they'll come in with the engineer of record for the stormwater management plan who will do an analysis and confirm whether it is or is not in compliance. That will then get reviewed by the town's third-party engineer, and then by September 1st, I'll have affirmation of that whole process evolving, and then we'll know what the steps are.
It was sort of meant to go in the regulations as sort of a comfort to people to know that we are indeed following up on these yearly reports.
So that's fine.
So if we are requiring construction observation agreements in some form of bonding, that is a check and a release of,
No.
no,
You don't, my suggestion to the board, or recommendation to the board, is not to link the construction observation agreement and the bond with the stormwater management plan. That's why the regs are very clear on setting up an entirely separate function. So when these were implemented at my previous employer, what was done is the stormwater management plan would come in as part of the planning board application. That was sent to the third-party engineer, and they put together an escrow estimate for what it would be just to do stormwater. And that was a separate escrow account from the construction observation agreement or any bond. And then when the annual review was done, the bill was expensed out of that escrow account, and then the applicant, as part of the stormwater management plan, was to maintain an escrow of X amount of dollars. And that's going to vary depending on, you know, is it 5 manholes or is it 5 manholes and 15, you know, detention basins and all of that sort of thing.
and we're eliminating that?
No.
We're keeping that?
We're keeping that, but I don't want the board to get confused between the construction observation and project bonding that will come up next and the financial surety from the stormwater management plan.
Okay, well, can we add it,
Add what?
this new section?
The separate part that talks about stormwater management to a
That
separate
we
bond.
simply review it each year?
Sure.
Oh, okay, all right, great. Okay, anybody have anything else? Okay, then, can this go back to you, and you need to prepare it for the site plan and subdivision? Okay,
Yeah, and now I'll take the step of actually coming up with the appropriate sections and everything else.
yeah, okay, and when would this be ready for public
Oh, well, let's say
hearing?
the March work session?
March 1st?
No,
we
the second meeting in March,
Oh,
because we
March
can't
1st.
notice for the,
Don't we get a chance to look at this one more time before it goes to public session?
If you want to.
Well, there's been a whole slew of changes
Yeah.
and suggestions in here, plus
my
brand new
goal will be to
section.
get it back for the first meeting in March with it already being noticed for the second meeting in March, so
Fine.
we'll have time to change it.
Okay, all right.
The only kicker will be if we notice it and there are changes subsequent to this update.
Well, let's not have that happen.
Okay, so if we're going to review it again, I'll push off to the first meeting in April for a public hearing.
Well, I would like to review it again after, I've not been able to follow all of these little changes that you've been making
Yeah,
along the way,
right,
and I can't
right.
look at a document and vote on it unless I am able to see exactly what it is I'm voting on.
Okay, all right, fine. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Is it worth having input from some of the stakeholders who were involved in writing this document?
Okay, and,
Well, my thought was to get all of the comments in, and whatever comments I have in writing can be shared with that group as the edits are going on.
But perhaps if they have any real opposition to anything we've discussed here, it might be useful to hear now and might make the process simpler. I don't know.
It might.
okay, planning board, you all okay with that?
Want to do it now and have your public comment session now and then another public comment session later, or do you want to wait until we're done with our business and then
Well-
have a public comment session?
My guess is they struggled to follow it as several of the board members might have, so
Yeah.
it might be the first meeting and,
But they may have something which they immediately find that we may then want to look at. I just, I think it would be
Yeah.
useful and might make the process faster.
Okay, That,
Are there anything that we changed that is worrisome?
yeah. Oh, okay, all right, great, very good.
There's the
Okay, so that's the plan.
Turn in all of your comments by the end of today or sometime by the end of the week, and I'll get, not you. We'll go from there.
Only the comments that were brought up here, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right, great. Very good. Okay, on to the next. Okay. Oh, discussion on the bond issue. That was the next item on the agenda.
So at the last meeting, there was a question about granting waivers to construction observation agreements, or whether that was a standing issue or a bonding issue. So what I did was I printed out the two applicable sections for you. The two applicable sections are right there. It's very clear that the surety is to cover, hold on. What it says is completion of all roads, public or private drainage, comma, and landscaping. So similar to what I discussed at the last meeting, it typically applies to those projects where there's going to be a public dedication of land, such as a road, or a road that is going to be open to the public. So if you're going to have a road or landscaping, the board can require a bond or a construction guarantee. My suggestion is that projects are going to range everywhere from the addition of a salt shed or to a full-on hunter's shopping complex coming in. I don't think it is necessarily obligatory of the board to require a surety, but my suggestion is to leave it open to planner's suggestion, if you will, a recommendation that the board look at a surety to cover certain elements of a plan, depending on the size and scope of the plan. If nothing else, it will remain a placeholder in the planner review that, either if it came from fire, PD, planning, et cetera, there's a recommendation one way or the other, and the board has that. So as the public hearing proceeds, you can then decide if you're going to require the surety or not. Similarly, the construction observation agreement is brought up under 173.30. You can essentially require any other inspection or study that you feel is appropriate to address the questions or parameters of site plan review. Again, this is going to be very project specific in my mind. If someone is simply putting up a salt shed, for example, you probably don't need a construction observation agreement, but if there's a very detailed landscaping plan or, following earlier discussion, something other than an intricate stormwater design that the board believes needs extra eyes, you could require a construction observation agreement for those elements. But just to reiterate, going back to Vaughn's question, the stormwater management plan is going to come with its own set of surety and inspection and evaluation.
Every time?
Every stormwater management plan is going to have to come with a ability to inspect. And now, the scope and breadth of it, if you have a very detailed plan on steep slopes next to prime wetlands, it might require a biannual inspection as opposed to an annual inspection, but you'll get that feedback from the town's engineer, not just the recommendation of an applicant.
So let's say we have a site plan review for a waterfront property because it exceeds 20%.
No, it won't
No?
come.
It's not a stormwater management plan?
It is, but it goes back to the question I raised on what the language in shorefront residential is intended to mean. In shorefront residential, as you're particularly aware, there is a section that says if you're over 20%, you need a stormwater management plan. The question to the board was, are these stormwater regs what that is supposed to mean? And the general consensus was no, because we didn't want to go onto single-family lots with those regulations. So that's on the work plan. We need to figure out how to address shorefront residential in excess of 20%.
So it's very clear that these new stormwater management plans are only for projects coming under site plan review
Or
because they're
subdivision,
commercial?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That was the primary comment back when we put the draft out to engineers, surveyors, experts in the water field. The resounding comment back was stay at a single family, and here's the conflicts, and this board generally agreed with that.
So the question
It would
is,
become the only scenario where a single family property would come before the planning board.
So the question then is, do we rely on the planner to make recommendations in his planner review, whether the project requires a COA or a bond or neither of the above?
Or both.
Or both, and we always have the flexibility to say, nope, we disagree, it does require, or nope, we disagree, it doesn't require. The board retains authority and power, but we get to rely on the planner's suggestion. And it relieves the board of some uncertainty when we're looking at an application, whether we should impose a bond or a construction observation agreement, because now we'll have the planner's recommendation, whether we should or shouldn't, and then we can discuss that. So I would recommend that we accept the planner's suggestion in this case.
The way I read this, the major impact for the bond would be for roads that aren't finished off, and you get the hot top and the first coat and the second coat, and it says the amount sufficient. So that gives you the leeway to make that determination what the amount sufficient is, because it's right there, 173.16.
So typically what that means is when an applicant comes in and says, we're going to build a half mile of road, and Brad can answer this better than I can. They say it's going to take, it's X dollars a foot based on this for sub-base, base, you know, the first 2.5 inches of asphalt, the hot top, et cetera, et cetera. So they put together a cost estimate of what the half mile of road's going to be. That goes to the third-party engineer. The third-party engineer says that looks like a reasonable figure, and that is what the basis of the surety is based on. Where it becomes difficult is if you post a bond for $1 million worth of road and it takes 20-some years. The question is, how do you go back and get more money out of it if you need to? Because the surety is only used if somebody fails to perform what they said they were going to do. So, and then as those layers are installed, the one that's coming to the top of my head right now is Ambrose Way. Originally, let's just say $2 million was put down for the road. As the road was completed through its various lifts, if you will, that money was reduced. So the surety amount was reduced, and it was just procedural with the amount of installation.
How would that go with the amount of time it costs more to do that road? If somebody waits 20 years, the money that you took 20 years before doesn't seem like, if you parted it out 5 or 6 different times, wouldn't be enough.
You typically don't part it out until base asphalt is down. So the only thing that's going to fluctuate is the hot top. For example, Ambrose is still waiting the final wearing course, if you will. So the bond was ultimately reduced down to the point where hot top plus inflation equals where they are. But regardless of how much surety is held, the applicant's still responsible. Even if you end up with a $5 bond left over and the town has to take over the project and put in $500,000 worth of investment, it still goes back to the applicant to reimburse the town. It's much more complicated than this makes it look. But the suggestion is, instead of requiring an applicant to submit a waiver each time for a surety or a construction observation agreement, there would be a discussion that would be presented as part of my report to the board, and the board could then decide to accept or not accept. So if I recommended that a surety wasn't required and the board felt it was, one of the conditions of approval would be coordinate with staff to post a surety in accordance with 173.16, and that would happen as part of the approval.
But they would, somebody would come in front of us asking for a waiver for that, like they...
No, that's what started happening. When I first started writing planner reviews, there were comments about, I didn't even address this section either of these sections because the board typically addressed it. And the question was raised, so I started saying, you know, comply with the regulations. Applicant should be responsible for complying with 173.16 and 173.30. And the board just started approving projects. And then recently it came up again, why aren't we doing a bond for this? Why aren't we doing a construction observation agreement? So remember the past couple of public hearings, there was a discussion on granting a waiver, encouraging the applicant to request a waiver, and instead of putting the planning board in that spot, I'd rather give you more information up front and then let you make a decision at the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Okay?
Yep.
Right, so,
so it doesn't really require a motion in my mind. It's just as long as we're okay with the general tenet of this memo, that's how I'm going to proceed with the planner recommendations. And in
okay,
future public hearings.
We can't do it like we just did the stormwater, where we said, go ahead and prepare for the public hearing?
No, what's going to happen is the next site plan application or subdivision application that comes in, my planner review is going to call, similar to.
Okay, so we don't need all of this wording that you've proposed?
Nope. It's not, no wording is proposed here. What I'm going to do on the planner review for right now, for example, it talks about access, parking and circulation, landscaping, snow storage. I'm going to put one in there that says construction surety or construction observation agreement. Say based on the site, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what the words are going to be yet. I recommend they be required to post a surety, and then it'll also have a corresponding condition, et cetera.
Yeah, okay, all right. I got it. So you'd like a motion to move ahead with this, right? Yeah, I'm not sure that we do either. I mean, this would be
I'm more concerned
part
if
of
any,
your-
more concerned if any members have a concern with it being addressed that way. And if no one does, I'll just start adding that to the planner review.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Good.
Let's see, master plan implementation, I think we're moving along.
We seem to be.
Yeah.
Basically, all the departments that have issues or have recommendations made to them, as in Board of Selectmen, Public Works, Electric Department, et cetera, have replied, and that data has been put into a rather massive spreadsheet, and in very, very rough terms, approximately 20% of the high priority recommendations have been acted on and basically accomplished by the various departments, Board of Selectmen. Now, at the same time, some of those were the easy ones to do because one of the recommendations had to do with continue with the milfoil program, and the Board of Selectmen has been doing that for a regular basis for a long time. So that one was easy to do. Approximately 45% of the other high priority and medium priority recommendations have been working along in very active progress. And then you go to the next stage, which means that basically 60 or 2/3 of the recommendations have either been accomplished or they're being worked on actively. The other third ends up being things which, when I look at them, some of them have been looked at long ago and decided nothing can happen with them, and so therefore those are on the back burner. Because that's where they've been and that's where they probably will be for a while. And so some of the ones which are left over are things which are not really possible to do, as in we have looked at sidewalks on Bay Street before, and even though it was a recommendation to put them in there, you look at it and you say, what can I do? So you throw up your hands and you say, yeah, we talked about it, but we're not going to do much about it right now. But basically, if we have gotten in a 2-year time frame 2/3 of the recommendations underway, I think that's a pretty good plan. At the end of February, there's going to be a committee who's going to look at these issues, and then we'll make a report to the board. And I also think that that information should get out to the general public, perhaps with an article in the Granite State about what we're doing. And I think in many ways the town can pat itself on the back for doing a lot of what was recommended.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Good. Okay, I needed to add one more item here, and that's the reappointment of Julie Jacobs. She'd like to be reappointed for another year. So let's see, that, if we did that today,
I think she gets appointed for a 3-year term.
what?
I think she gets appointed for a 3-year term regardless of her personal request, and then if she leaves,
Well,
the new
it-
alternate would come in for the...
Yes, and it is a personal request,
Yeah.
right?
Well, then if that happens, then I'm like 18 months into my 3-year thing.
So the next alternate would pick up at 18 months and go for the remainder of the 3-year term. The statute's very clear. You just
Yeah.
you're either appointed or not. So if you're appointed, you get the 3-year term.
Then you get to keep on, because what came up was what Doug said. On the website, the date is wrong for me, which is fine. But I came in partway through, so do I really need to go see Pat Waterman again to get re-sworn in, or am I swearing good, you know?
Oh, you need to get
If you're
sworn in.
Yeah,
appointed,
you
we'll
need to
just-
get sworn
Yeah. You're
in,
appointed for a
so
term,
that's
you need
why
to be
I'd
sworn.
like to see us vote on it. And
And,
Would you
and do
be
we,
willing-
and do we do it midterm again, or do we wait until voting season in another month?
well, we'd like you to be able to vote here in every,
So it's basically a 3-year cycle. After 3 years, you get sworn in again and
yeah,
and
but
go
but
from
you
there.
But it's only been 18 months. See, that's the dilemma.
Well, can't we just appoint her for 3 years? Forget about what's left?
I think, well, I spoke to Pat the other day about something else anyway, and this came up, and she said that, because I asked her, I said, this is, a thing on the website. She said, well, it just has to be fixed. And then I said, well, what about the dates? And she said, well, there's a form that you've got to, Kathy's got to fill out as the chairman. And I don't know if Kathy's done it yet. But then Pat said, but what's the date? And I'm like, I don't know, you'll have to look it up. So I think it's between Kathy now and Pat downstairs is trying to figure out, when was I sworn in, and am I still valid?
Oh, we need to find out who the alternate was that you replaced, how
Right.
much was left on
Alice-
their term when they
Oh.
left.
I think he was done because it was Alice
Dave
Alessandrino.
Alessandroni. Yeah,
How we say Dave's name.
right,
And I think he'd been gone for a few months.
right,
Correct.
yeah.
But that was the end of his term was up. Or no?
Remember, Mike? Was he done?
Yeah,
But couldn't we just handle this by saying, let's start her again fresh when day tomorrow?
Yes, that would be the clean.
that's what I was suggesting, to
3
start
years.
out
Somebody has to
with.
figure out when the last one,
Why don't we simply reappoint her as of what, today?
Yes, yeah, we could vote on it today, okay? All right, so,
Whoops, you
Who
got
said,
it.
who was two?
Don did.
I guess you're
Mike and John.
okay.
Thank you, friends.
Has a motion been made?
Yes.
But
Yes.
Mike made it, and John seconded it. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
you better write down the date,
Congratulations.
write down the
Well,
date.
that's the thing. I think
so
maybe
the-
Pat can figure out what the dates are supposed to be.
I don't know if Kathy was going to mention this or not, but there is a regular planning board seat up for election this year.
There are two.
Two.
Two?
Well, right, but one is going to become
Vacant.
vacant. So the reason it was easier just to reappoint Julie is because the newly appointed
Right.
alternate has also a 3-year term, so we've upset the cycle by Julie, but Doug is going to be presumably elected in Susan's spot. That's why it was cleaner just to do the 3-year alternate appointment.
Okay,
we
but
only
you
have two
can
people running?
finish anytime you feel the desire to.
Yes, and we'll note the date.
Yeah, just figure it out with Pat, because she
Yeah,
was really
right.
like,
Right.
confused as well, because, I mean, we did the swearing in outside in the parking lot at the height of COVID. you know, so she was kind of like up in the air about it too, as to what was actually happening, other than I covered the base.
Okay, very good. Can you tell Pat that we did vote on Julie, so...
With
when
a
she-
3-year term, and we'll update the
February
website
1st.
and have the paperwork ready, so whenever you'd like to be sworn in, we can do that.
Can you just email me when that whole thing happens? Because I think I have to make an appointment with Pat.
Okay, so we're all set with that. Okay, great. And after our discussion at the last meeting, when we talked about the sewer issue, I sent an email to Dave Ford, Jim Pinio, and Linda Murray, asking if we could meet with them. But anyway, so I'll let you know that it's, I suggested the next meeting, which is February 15th, right? Yeah, okay. So that was the meeting I suggested. We'll see what their response is. Okay, and that's for the discussion that we all had here. Just keep that in mind so you can at least ask any questions, or, you know, express any issues that we need to. Okay, other business? Anybody else have anything other than the minutes?
One item, beg
Okay.
pardon, and they are referred to in the minutes of January 18 on page 3, the newspaper notice requirements. We were going to discuss that at today's meeting.
Okay,
I had made a motion at that time, as according to the minutes, to change the language on site plan review notice to remove the requirement for newspaper notification.
I will bring back that language at your next meeting so that that with stormwater can be set for the same public hearing.
Fine. Thank you.
That makes sense?
yes. Okay, all right. Okay,
Public comment.
so a review of the minutes of December 7th?
January
January
4th.
4th?
Somebody make a motion, or?
No, I think-
January 4th is the...
No, I think the
Okay,
wrong, I
well-
think the wrong minutes went in the packet. You were supposed to have December 7th and January 18th.
Right.
Because you already approved January 4th.
Because when we looked at the December 7th minutes, people hadn't had enough time,
Right.
I think.
So I would suggest you move December 7th to the next meeting.
So
Again.
moved.
December 7th,
Yes.
okay, all right, I'll second that. Okay, anybody else have any changes for December 7th? Okay, then, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
This is-
Opposed?
Motion is moving them to the next meeting.
We're moving the December 7 minutes
Yeah.
to the next meeting.
Someone
Yes.
should probably abstain.
We're moving it to the, is that what that?
Yeah, the
Yes, we're
motion was to
moving it.
move consideration of December 7 to our next meeting because it's not
okay.
in our packet.
Okay,
We got January 4
all
instead.
right, okay, sorry I missed that one,
But that's okay, we can consider it voted on.
Okay, so that stays on the agenda, and we go to January 18th. Because January 4th, we did. So January 18th.
I was absent, but I don't know what this page 2, top of shorefront regulation means. Kathy said we have talked about the stormfront regulations. What is that? Shorefront?
Shorefront.
Shorefront, right, yes.
Cold front.
It's stormfront.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other changes except for page 2, under the 2022 work program, shorefront regulations, change from stormfront. Is that okay? All right, motion to accept these minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, very good. Anybody have anything else? And the rules of procedures, we've got to see that in that document that you just brought up.
Yeah, well, Tavis will
Yeah.
bring them along for us to take a look at, right?
Yeah.
Rules of
Rules of
procedure, which are going to get changed.
Rules of procedure are already changed to not require the newspaper. The next change is to pull it out of site plan regulations.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right, yeah, right, okay.
So I did find that for Doug, when he questioned the plantings in B, the stormwater management plan shall provide that. And when you go to XI number 11, in the middle, it says the use of native or climate-adaptive plantings and perennial turf grasses appropriate for site conditions are required for stormwater treatment areas.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, yes. Okay, anything else, folks? Okay,
Move to adjourn.
thank you.
Seconded.
Aye.
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 He spoke for me. Vote.